Welcome back to Brighter Morning with Bhoe. It's so good to have you. You know, we are on MCTV, Multicultural TV, and we are on U97.5 FM radio. And we're so glad you're listening. We're so glad you're watching. It makes us happy to know that you are engaged with some of the issues. We try to do a different kind of show here. It's not only news and views. We try to explore all kinds of things. We explore the international dimension of politics and power and economy. We explore what's happening in the region, because this is the place where we live. We explore what's happening in Trinidad and Tobago. And we do not do so in a narrow, partisan, political way. We try to deal with issues. We try to deal with ideas. We try to deal with what people are thinking, what is motivating them, what is prompting them to do the things or to feel the way that they do. Okay? And this is your show, I want you to know. My name is Bhoe Tiwari, and this is Brighter Morning with Bhoe. I have Krishna Samaroo, who will join us shortly. He is a retired teacher from the secondary school system, teaching literature and other things, but dominantly literature, and he's also a poet. And we will talk with him. You heard my last conversation between Marjorie Thorpe, Dr. Marjorie Thorpe, and myself. Marjorie and I go back a long way. We work together, and we are good friends. And I enjoyed having the conversation with her, but I want to focus a little bit on the secondary school environment and the students there. It's one thing to operate at university, it's another thing to operate at the other level. And I want to let you know that I've taught in secondary school. I taught for 3 years at San Fernando Government Secondary, and I taught literature there, and I taught English. All my students passed English language in the years that I taught them. Nobody failed. Not a single person failed in my class that I taught English language to. And I also taught literature, I think only for 1 year, might have been 2. But I enjoyed engaging my students. I want to say just one thing before Krishna comes on, and it is this. You know, I'm not a big social media fan. I am on Facebook, and I do engage on Facebook sometimes, but I see things happening sometimes, you know, where people are saying that I don't know who they claim is trying to force them to take a vaccine. You know, nobody is forcing you to take a vaccine. You know. If you don't want to take a vaccine, don't take it. Nobody is really forcing you. There are rules and laws in the society, and there's nothing in the law that forces you to take a vaccine. But when you exercise your choice, expect that it will have consequences, and you have to deal with those consequences. And I want to say, in this issue of vaccines and vaccination, I think what people are trying to do is persuade people that it's good for you and it's good for your country. It's good for the other people that you live with in the society to get a vaccine, because that is what science tells us is the best route to take. And whatever the mistakes and the mishaps before, since about March of this year, the point is that the government has done very well to have the vaccines in Trinidad and Tobago, and it's available. There are many countries that have no vaccines, and this is going to be a problem for them. People want vaccines in those countries, but they can't get it. There was a time when there was a certain vaccine anxiety here, and people rushed for the vaccines. And I don't think that we should be complacent now and take the view that, all right, we have plenty vaccines, we have plenty choices. I will think about whether I'm going to get it. As I said, the choice is yours. Nobody is trying to force you. But I want to mention that there are consequences of not taking the vaccine. And you can't expect that you would exercise what you consider your right and that other people will not exercise what they consider their right. Okay? And rights could collide in a situation like this. Now, the Prime Minister used the example of Russian roulette, and I want to explain what Russian roulette is. Some of you might know, some of you might not know. You could always look up something that you don't know on the internet. You know, if you go to Google and you put a word, you can get the meaning of the word. If you put a concept, you could get the meaning. It is possible to do that. And I would urge those of you, if ever you don't understand something, to use Google to help you to learn new things. So in Russian roulette, what happens, you know, in a revolver, you have 6 spaces for bullets. And Russian roulette is taking those 6 spaces, emptying out the bullets from them and leaving 1 bullet inside of the gun. And then you revolve the space with the bullets. You spin it around, so you don't know whether if you shoot, you are going to get the bullet or you will get an empty space. And in Russian roulette, after you put the 1 bullet in the 6 spaces, in one of 6 spaces, and you revolve the piece of the gun that holds the bullet, you then put it to your head and you shoot. If you're lucky, you will shoot blank. If you are unlucky, you're going to blow your brains out. And that is what the Prime Minister was talking about. He was saying that you are taking a kind of calculated risk. In this instance, it would be a 1 in 6 risk if you are not taking the vaccine. And I don't know what the calculation of risk is for not taking the vaccine. What I do know is that all the evidence tells us that the people who are getting infected and dying from the vaccine now are people who are unvaccinated. And therefore, I want to say to those people who are hesitant with due cause, and I know that people are hesitant for reasons, I want to say, you know, do the homework, read up, try and understand and make yourself comfortable. And eventually, when you're comfortable, go and take the vaccine. When those of you who are, you know, afraid for whatever reason, uncertain and so on, do the work, talk to other people, try and assess what the risk might be, and go ahead eventually when you are comfortable, because I don't think you should do it if you're not comfortable, go and take the vaccine. But those people who are ideologically opposed to vaccines,
and I'm your host.
For whatever reason, I want to say that you are misinformed. All right? And you are being ideologically misled. And there is no rational basis on which you can take the decision that you're doing. And you have no right to insist on your position, your ideological position, and then demand that other people accommodate you. All right? It's a democracy we have. It's not a minority authoritarian state. So that is my view that I would like to express on this issue. Nobody is forcing you. It's a voluntary system. The government has indicated that it's not mandatory. But people are taking steps to be able to operate. Because if you have a business, if I have a business, I want to open my business and to keep it open. I don't want to open my business and facilitate the process of infection. And then when the infections come in large numbers because of unvaccinated people, the government then shuts down business again, and my business did not collapse this time, but it will certainly collapse the next time. So if we have to have a modus operandi of living with the virus and keeping our businesses open and being circumspect about the way we manage ourselves, we wash our hands, we wear our masks indoors, and we social distance, even though we get the vaccine, if we have to do that and we don't want businesses to close again, then I think that businesses are within their right and are obliged to look after those employees who have vaccinated and want to feel safe, and businesses are correct to keep their customers safe and to make sure that the unvaccinated do not present a vulnerability that they can manage. So those are my positions, and I'm making my positions clear. I'm not unequivocal about this thing. You have your right. You don't want to take a vaccine, fine. And I know that there are different types of people who don't want to take the vaccine. The poll said on Sunday that about 30% of the population does not want to take the vaccine for different reasons. And that is a little higher than what the situation is internationally. But I would say that out of those 30% that do not want to take the vaccine, about 15%, half of them, are ideological, and about 15% of them are uncertain. They are skeptical, they are not sure, for whatever reason they don't want to do it. I want to urge and persuade, help to persuade that 15% from the 30% who are skeptical and unsure to think about it, read about it, get the information, and so on. The other thing that comes out internationally is that most of the people who are ideologically opposed to the vaccines are getting their information from social media. And social media, besides all the good that it does, and I use social media, is also the place of the most significant proportion of horrible misinformation in the world system. Sometimes you do not even know the source from which the misinformation is coming. So thank you very much for listening to me. That is my position. As I said, I state my position clearly. I am not unequivocal about it. You may disagree with me. That is your right. Okay? But you can't tell me what to think and what to say. All right? Thank you very much. I want to go on now to my guest, Mr. Krishna Samaroo, and we'll have a nice conversation about literature at the secondary level. Krishna, good morning, Mr. Samaroo. How are you?
Thank you, sir. Good morning. I am okay for the hour.
Okay, I don't know how you're looking there, but I'm seeing you looking up, and I'm seeing the below. No, you want to come down a little more, so I can see your whole face. Yeah, a little more. Right. Okay, that's better. So people can see who you are. Right, that's better. Okay, so you are a literature teacher. Tell us a little bit about your experience as a literature teacher in the secondary school system. Talk to me about that a little bit and let your listeners and your viewers understand. We are on U97.5 radio and MCTV.
Okay. Good morning, listeners. I studied literature at university. And so when I wanted to teach, Professor Ramchan wrote a recommendation for me. And what he said was that from my study of African literature and West Indian literature, I would make a good recruit now that the CXC syllabus was coming into force. So when I went to Pleasantville Secondary, Pleasantville Senior Comprehensive then, I got my timetable. But when I looked at it, I didn't see literature at all. I saw English language. So I thought this was not what I wanted. I wanted to teach literature. I felt that I don't know how comfortable I would be with that. I thought that the people who did linguistics might be in a better position to teach language. But I got my break in 1981 and I got my literature, and that was the beginning of good times for me. I totally enjoyed teaching literature to those adolescents, and they enjoyed me as well. What I had what I used is a certain method. I I would go to class on time. I would be prepared. I would have my notebook. I would have my text and so on, and they would be ready. And we would get into the reading and the examination of the texts and so on. And it was amazing how they responded. I remember we had departmental meeting, and the teachers were talking about the problems they had and so on. And this one had that problem with discipline, and that one had that problem with late coming and so on. And I was quiet right through. So one senior teacher turned to me and said, "But Mr. Samaroo, you don't have any problems teaching? You don't encounter any kind of problems with these students?" I said, "No, I go to class prepared, and they are there, and we do work." And from that class, that first class that I had with the O-level students, there were a number of people that I would cherish forever. Brian Haynes was one of those. He is now, he has moved to be one of the top persons in the entertainment industry, right? Brian Haynes, he goes by the name O'Brien Haynes now. And we had a graduation, and we called him to be the feature speaker. And when O'Brien was making his speech, he said, "Is Mr. Samaroo there in the audience?" You know, and he asked me to stand up, and he went at length about how what influence I had on him. He gave a rather inspirational speech on the various ups and downs of his life. I will always remember that. And look where he is today. And I have on Facebook quite a number of them. One of the students from that same class is a girl named Merlin Sewage Day. She was Sewage Day, but she's now Merlin. She calls me Silver Fox, and she always has something good to say about me. There is one who is away in Canada, Colleen Lal, and everything I write, she says it's a masterpiece. I could just respond to happy birthday greetings, and she'd say, "Oh, even your response is a masterpiece." So these were good times with the O-level students.
So you were a good teacher, a successful teacher, and your students responded to literature. What were some of the things that you remember in your teaching of literature that the students were interested in literary study? A couple of things. Remember, we don't have all day, so you have to be sharp in your responses.
Okay, all right. I remember distinctly when I was teaching rhythm, and I had this class, and we were doing tiger, tiger, tiger. And they started to, as I showed them, how the rhythm was tiger, tiger, bird in bright. They started to drum on the desks, and beat the desk, the whole class. teachers from neighboring classes had to come and say, "What is going on here?" You know,
This and
because they
this
were so enthused.
and
They
this
started
is
to understand what rhythm is all about.
and this is
Yes,
William
sorry.
Blake. This is not a West
Yes,
Indian writer. This is
the
William
tiger,
Blake,
right.
right?
Yes. And another episode I remember, it's stored in my memory. When we did the Wine of Astonishment,
Yeah.
there was the chapter with on breaking the law, and
This this is Earl
you,
Lovelace's novel. We're going to
no,
have earlier later in the
the,
month. Yeah,
yes,
this is
the
Earl
Wine of
Lovelace's
Astonishment.
novel, The Wine of Astonishment.
Yes,
Right.
the chapter with to break the law. We were reading
Yes.
it in class, and we took turns. But then when I started to read it, and I started to talk like a preacher, you know. I remember, oh God, they started to go amen and all kind of things, hallelujah and so on. These are wonderful experiences. They are
Yeah.
treasures for me, and I
What
suppose for my students as well.
Very good. What other book did you enjoy teaching and your students
Well,
enjoyed?
yeah, well, the sixth form, I got my break with sixth form 2 years after my break with the O-level students. Um, the sixth form was handled by the head of the department and his assistant, Louis Regis. Well, sad to say Louis Regis has passed on, a really great mind. He used to handle Chaucer, and Mr. Glasgow would handle the rest of the book. He called me in. He said, "You want to try the Mimic Man?" I said, "Okay." So I went and I started to teach the Mimic Man. And the thing is, after teaching the Mimic Man,
Mimic Men is
I
V.S. Naipaul.
PS Nightfall, right?
Right.
PS Nightfall. After that first session I had with them, that was in June, coming towards the end of the term and so June. I got that break. They said, Mr. Glasgow, who is the head of the department, came to me and said, Mr. Samaroo, them students like you so much, they want you again, they want a next book. So he say, one teach Heart of Darkness. So the, that is how I got my break with the sixth form. And since then, from 1983 to 1995, I handled the sixth formers. Naipaul's work, The Mimic Men, was difficult for them. So too, Heart of Darkness. They were difficult works,
Those are very
but
difficult books.
very difficult. Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. But from the way I taught it, from the way I made it simple for them to understand, the way they interacted with the writers and the text itself, from then on, that's where I got my break with sixth form. I became a specialist sixth form teacher. And it was a way of introducing them to Nightfall, our own. I hope that they would move on to other works by Nightfall. Like when I interact with the past sixth form students, even the sixth form, I always ask them now. They have now that they're married, they have children, some are doctors, lawyers, and so on, engineers, teachers. I ask them, I say, do you still read literature? And they say, sure, sure, Mr. Samaroo. You shouldn't have to ask that.
Yes.
Okay?
Okay. Well, let us look, since you mentioned 3 books, let us look at the books a little bit. And in each case, tell me what you think endeared the students to the book and what you think some of them got out of it beyond the joy and pleasure of reading the novel, because you mentioned 3 novels. Let us start with Wine of Astonishment by
Yes.
Earl
So
Lovelace.
lovely. Okay. The thing about Lovelace, the Wine of Astonishment, there was a nice structure to it. It dealt with the spiritual Baptists, the law. that prescribed or prescribed how they would practice from 1917, and then that law was repealed in 1951. So the students got a sense immediately of structure, and then, of course, it was written in the dialect. So they were reading language that they would speak not in the classroom most of the time, but
Yes.
definitely out of the classroom. That's the language, the vernacular. So they identified totally with that. Then, of course, the idea of struggle, the struggle of African peoples, the struggle of Caribbean peoples to have to deal with the colonial system of oppression and prejudice and so on. They identified with that, and
Okay.
yes, so that was the one of, and of course the family, the family, the people who came to Pleasantville, the students, they tended to identify with the family of and how the people, how there were there were children who wanted to get out of that village of Bonas,
Yes.
where the novel was set, and that was happening to their family as well. So
Okay.
in a number of ways, this wine, the Wine of Astonishment, you can ask them, when you see them on Facebook, what they think of the Wine of Astonishment, how that impacted on their lives.
Yes.
Now,
Well,
yes,
that is wonderful. So the students connected with the book because of the
definitely.
language. They
Yes,
connected with the book because it has historical
it's tough.
significance for Trinidad
Yes,
and Tobago. They would
correct.
understand the Baptist community and their
Yes,
struggle to have freedom to practice their religion. And they identified also with the dreams and aspiration of a family to get
yes.
out of a situation of limitation and to open themselves out to the world of ambition. Is that correct?
I think that's what I wanted to say. Don't worry.
Well, well,
Yeah,
that is why we are engaging, right? Okay,
yeah.
and the second book, let's take the second book, Naipaul, Mimic Men. That is a
Mimicking my
hard book.
phone.
That is a hard
Yeah,
book for anybody to read, including people who are well schooled in literature. So tell me what your students got out of that.
right. Well, what they were seeing, the Mimic Man to me is a good book, one of the great books of Napoleon. I don't know how people tend to play it down, and we all know about the House of Mystery. This was the Enigma of Arrival, cited by the British Academy, and the travel books, An Area of Darkness,
No, but let's talk about Mimic
and
Men now.
Beyond the Village. But the Mimic Man,
what did your children in school get out of that?
what we saw is the political, an awareness of what was happening to us politically, and you know the the attempt to get out of the colonial, the colonial bondage that we were in.
All
The
right,
aim,
and that bondage is more
yes,
psychological, right? It is more
yes.
psychological. Yeah, okay.
But what I saw with the Mimic Men, I mean, in hindsight, these same students could see what was happening to what was happening to our politicians. This they could relate to what we examined in the Mimic Men. You take a number of politicians and the career, and some of them the failed ambitions, to effect meaningful change, meaningful transformation. in our West Indian islands in Trinidad. Well, Isabella, of course, is the fictional island, right?
Yes.
But it speaks to us in the West Indies. And I'm saying Naipaul's work, it vindicates, is a vindication, sorry, the experience is vindicate Naipaul's work. What happened to politicians in the West Indies?
No, but tell me,
What do you
I'm
think?
very
Yeah.
interested in what the student got out of a literary work like Mimic Men. What do you think they related to? You said very well what they related to in Wine of Astonishment. What do you think they related to in Mimic Men?
Well,
So
to begin with,
they related to the fact that there
yeah,
was a colonial bondage beyond
yes,
political control that was psychological in nature, that just because we had independence doesn't mean that the mind was independent, right?
correct.
And the second thing is that they had an idea from, let's say, Ralph Singh as a politician in the book. They had an idea from him of the dilemma and the lack of, what can I say, of a sense of purposefulness and certainty of many of our politicians who take office. Is that correct?
Yes,
All right, well, you continue now. What else did they get
yeah.
out of it?
But to begin with, Naipaul, it's the first time at advanced level, they have a local writer, a
Yes,
Trinidadian like themselves,
right.
and they're studying because we were doing GC in those days, you know, and we had to do with a sort of non West Indian books. So
Yes,
it was interesting that they placed the Mimic Men on the syllabus, and they identified with that. They were
okay,
seeing one of their own. They were seeing Isabella, which they recognize as Trinidad.
yes.
Yes,
All right, so the sense of identification was with the
the
sense
students.
of the sense of discovery
Yeah,
was the recognition that there was a psychological bondage that was the residue of colonialism even after independence. And this
correct. Yeah,
manifested itself in the politicians who governed. And
yeah,
secondly, that these politicians caught up in that, I don't know, that confusion of who they are and therefore the identity problem, really created a kind of situation in which the politicians were uncertain as to how to proceed and what to do. And then finally, they could identify with this work, which was set in the Caribbean, an island just like Trinidad and Tobago, although it was
yeah,
fictional. And many of the things that were happening, they could relate to, including the language and so on. Huh?
yeah,
Sure?
yes.
Okay, you want
Well,
to
the
add
thing
anything
about
to
it,
that?
yes, yes, the thing about the language, you know, certainly they would identify, they would be able to understand the language, but what was challenging for them was understanding this book because it he uses he breaks up the narrative, you know. You have
Yes.
the flashback and the
Yeah,
flash
you go
forward.
back and forth in
Yes.
time. Yes.
So that is what they enjoyed doing when they finally understood it. The first few years in London, back to Isabella and
Yes.
and then back to London. You know where
So,
he's writing his
so,
memoir.
so from that, they really learned the importance of literary technique and how it creates
Structure
power,
and
right?
certain, yeah,
Okay, so I always remember a line that Ralph Singh says in that, so many things I remember from that book, but Ralph Singh says at one point, fear the oppressor. Sorry, hate the oppressor, fear the oppressed.
Fear the oppressed, correct, yes.
And he captures the confusion and the ideological impotence of even a politician who might want to do something good. In that phrase, no? Naipaul captures that, hate the oppressors, fear the oppressed, and the politician is caught between that. So, let's go on. You talked about Heart of Darkness. Heart of Darkness is one of my favorite books. Conrad is someone I read very closely. Tell me about Heart of Darkness and how your students, your children, related to that. Because it's such a powerful book.
Yes. Powerful and difficult.
Yeah.
They really had problems with Heart of Darkness.
Yes.
But
well, first of all, it's set in Africa, in the Congo, so they would have to try and appreciate and understand.
Yes.
And then
make that geographical leap.
Yes, of course.
Yes. But what helped me and which I used to help them into it, Professor Gordon Roullette's lectures. He really made that book understandable to me.
Well, he studied Conrad, eh?
Yeah. That is what, and that it was his lectures now.
Yes.
His notes from his lectures that I used to guide my students to an appreciation of this Heart of Darkness, which the metaphorical journey going to the heart of Africa, is like going to the journey. It's a journey upriver, but it's a journey also within, deep within the heart of man.
Yes. And what you think your students were able to relate to in that?
Well, of course, the African setting, because but we had a mixed population in class, but definitely the African experience, and but more the use of symbols.
Yes. Okay, so they learned other things. I
remember just now. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I remember one image of when you say the settlement was like a pin drop or something like that. Is that correct? A pin drop.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, that is it. The images and the symbols. I had to make them aware of what these represent, and that is where Professor Roullette's notes came in handy.
Yes, okay. All right. Well, you had good teachers. You had Professor Ramchan, you had Professor Roulette.
Yes, I had the best.
They were very good.
I had the best. I had you
too. Well, I would modestly say that those are my seniors, and they were people I learned from. Huh?
Let me interrupt. I found when I went UE, you see Professor Ramchan, Professor Roulette, Dr. Torp, whom you had earlier on,
yes,
Dr. Isman, and you, and Dr. Singh.
Yes.
Could you ask a better set of lecturers than that? I don't know what happened after I left UE, but I felt I was in a time when I got the best.
Well, that's very kind of you, and
kind but true.
Sorry?
Kind and true.
Well, yes,
kind and true.
And I enjoy teaching. I never do anything that I don't love for long. If I don't love it, I leave it. But I
Yeah.
mean, I enjoy what I do and I make the most of what I do, and I love teaching. I loved it at secondary school. I loved it at university undergraduate level. I loved it at graduate level when I taught you in the master's program. But
Yes, the
even when
master's
I
program.
switched the content of my teaching to things like business and strategy and
Yes,
so
yes,
on, I always enjoyed the teaching, and more than that, my style was always Socratic and engaging, in which you had conversations. You know, I would do the conversation that we are having now in my class. I mean, as you well know, you know, so I always created that. But to get back to Conrad, you know, Conrad was one of the greatest writers who ever wrote, and one of the best novelists who ever wrote. He was a Polish person who learned the English language and mastered it to
yeah,
such a degree that he is without comparison, really, and he was heavily influential on V.S. Naipaul because he was the
yeah,
first person to so comprehensively address the colonial encounter and the imperialist enterprise and its
yeah,
impact on countries. And Heart of Darkness is the epitome of that. Because basically, when you take all the niceties out of it, what you have here are the imperialists coming into a country in the heart of the Congo, taking it over because they have guns, and the poor people, they have no weapons but spears, etc. They take it over completely. They use them in the economic enterprise in which they engage, and they are coming there to civilize people, right, from their point of view, from Europe. But in the process, what happens? It is not civilization that takes place, it's internal corruption that takes place in the hearts and spirit of the civilization master. And I think that
yeah,
is the essence and power of a book like that. It teaches you a lot, and the reflective power that a book like that facilitates in you is really, really significant. And so the discovery of Kurtz,
yes,
the
yes.
discovery for the reader of what Kurtz represents is
Mhm.
really the darkness of his own heart and the
Can I say
ability,
something here?
yes, and the
Yes.
ability
Let me just
of,
interject
yes, and the ability of
that.
the corruption, all right, to take over the big idea. You know, Conrad says in another place in a book called Nostromo, a man with a fixed idea is insane. That is why I can't take on ideologues so much, you know. When people are fixed in their ways and they will not
True.
listen and entertain other points of view, I can't deal with that.
Yeah.
So a man with a fixed idea is insane, and that is the imperial idea is this fixed idea that you have an underdeveloped world of uncivilized people, and you are going to civilize them, educate them.
Christianize and civilize.
That's
Yes.
right, and you will basically save them in this way, all right, literally through religious doctrine as well. And the end result is that the European enterprise of imperialism is so corrupt because of its fixed idea, because it will not take into account the
Massive failure.
evil of what it is
Yeah.
doing. So it is a very important book for teaching students. And if
Yeah.
you teach Heart of Darkness and Mimic Men together, I mean, teaching those two books together can allow a students coming out of secondary school to really understand what the imperial encounter is about. You know?
Yeah.
So these are powerful books, and as as any listener or viewer can see from our conversation here, literature is more than just the words that you read in a book. It has
No.
its own power in terms of ideas and impact and emotional resonance, you know? So, but Krishna, you were also a poet.
But before you go on, let me just add to what you just said. A reference. Was it Dr. Williams who said the blackest thing in slavery was not the black man?
Yes.
And was that what the heart of darkness was all about?
Well, in a sense, it was the idea that you would
Yeah.
enslave other people as part of an economic enterprise that you were building, and that
Yeah.
and basically the racism against blackness, etc. But the real blackness was in the fact that you would set up such a system as a world system of
The light,
economic
yeah.
that was meant to give economic prosperity to the imperial centers of the world, and that you did it on the on the backs of people that you had slave on the basis that they were black people. And I think that that is the same kind of concept, because Eric Williams was well read. I mean, he did history, but he was also well read in philosophy. And he had gone to Oxford, where, basically whatever you do, your initial courses at that time, I don't know what it is now, at that time you would be the exposure to things like philosophy and philosophical perspectives, etc., the great masters of philosophy. So, well, I want to give you an opportunity to talk as a poet rather than a teacher. You've done well as a teacher, and I want to congratulate you, and I want to congratulate all the students who benefited from you. But take an opportunity to read one of your poems. Why don't you do that?
All right, thanks. I will read from The Public Orator.
Yes.
I'm entitled Hindsight.
Put up the poem too now, next day. Right. You could put
As I rifle through could I? Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
As I rifle through the pages of my life, the different stages, my weary eyes rest on lines I read and reread, that tell of decisions and of revisions, and of changes that needed a chance. I glance at the unfolding chapters where some end and others do begin, with slight regrets at what could have been, but with a smile at what was, and a nod at what is, and a game untiring faith in what will be. Looking back, I can safely say I have sailed across a long way. Looking forward, I raise my gaze to the horizonless infinity that lies stretched before me.
All right. This is from your book.
Let me tell you, The Public Orator. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. This is the book, that's the poem. And you want to give the listener or the viewer the essence of what you are trying to say in that poem? Because the key thing in a poem is, when you read these words, what does a poem mean?
Yeah. Well, the key thing comes from the title, Hindsight.
Yes.
It's only in hindsight that you really get, what is it, 2020 vision.
Yes.
You look back on your life and you see where you have come from, what you have done, what you could have done, what you should have done,
Yes.
But then you realize you can't relive your life.
Yes.
You just have to go on.
Yes.
And I think that is what this sonnet, it's a sonnet, is
Yes.
about.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you
I
very much.
Okay, go ahead.
No, finish. We are going to have to close now. I have to go to the news.
Yes, all right. I was just saying, I read this poem to an 80-year-old woman, 80 years plus. And it brought tears to her eyes
Yes.
because you know what she would have been going through, all the memories would have
Yes.
been dredged up of her life
Well,
to the
well,
point where she's now 80.
that is that is what that is the essential power of literature, which is that a
Yes,
poem or a book can connect with the writer's imagination and the reader's or the listener's life. And that is what
yes.
makes for that human connection which Dr. Thorpe was talking about. Krishna, I want to thank you very much. This has been wonderful because
You're
it's not only
welcome, sir.
about literature and your poetry, but it's also about education. And I hope all
Yes.
those teachers who were watching remember what you said. You get to class on time, you go fully prepared,
Punctuality,
and the students have an
preparedness.
expectation that they are going to work for the 45 minutes or whatever it is that you have in
Yeah.
class. Thank you
48,
very, very
45.
much. This has been
Okay.
Brighter Morning
You're
with
welcome.
Bhoe. My name is Bhoe Tiwari, and we go on now to the news.